Good day and a warm welcome to Verwoerd Park Online. Today we are going to talk about one of the most famous stories in the Bible, Noah and the Ark. But like many other famous Bible stories, this story is also one of the most misunderstood stories. I hope that we will get a better understanding of it today. But now, as I always do, I'm going to ask you to become still with me for just a moment. Lord, you know my heart. You know the plans I'm making. You know my thoughts, even those I keep undercover, deep within myself. You know what I do in the dark when nobody else can see me. You know the hypocrisy that dwells within me, the hate that lingers, the fear that's always there, the angst. You also know that I don't have the words or even the understanding to ask for what I really need. So now I'm asking you, Lord Jesus, speak to me. Speak for me and speak through me. You now have the opportunity for some personal prayer. Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall on all the beasts of the earth, and on all the birds in the sky, on every creature that moves along the ground, and on all the fish in the sea. They are given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. But you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. And for your lifeblood I will surely demand an accounting. I will demand an accounting from every animal. And from each human being too, I will demand an accounting for the life of another human being. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made mankind. As for you, be fruitful and increase in number. Multiply on the earth and increase upon it." Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, "I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth." And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on earth." So God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant I have established between me and all life on earth." As I said, this is probably one of the most famous stories in the Bible. Now you can look at the story from many perspectives. You could read it as a historical narrative, something that happened just as told in the story. You can even bring some evidence to the table. I do, however, think that you miss so much of the story if you look at it from that perspective. You could also, as many people do, just downplay it as a fable, just a story. But again, you lose so much from that perspective. This is truly a remarkable story. When looked from the right angle, that gives you a great perspective on who we are and on who God is. So everybody knows the beginning of the story, Genesis 1. God made everything, stood back and smiled and said, everything is good. But then this creation does not act as God has intended. We read in Genesis 6 that God saw that every inclination of every human being was evil all of the time. Every single one of them, all of the time. So much so that God regretted making them in the first place. This makes God's heart deeply troubled. He is in fact so deeply troubled that he decides to undo everything. He plans a great destruction of the work of his hands, wiping the earth clean with a massive flood. What an incredible judgment. Luckily, in the chaos, God sees one man that's still righteous. He sees Noah. And God starts having a change of heart. The creation will be saved through Noah and his family. But it's still very much evident that this God has the power and will use it to bring forth whatever he wants to. And so, he indeed used this power and makes it rain for days and days on end, until every single living thing is swept from existence, except obviously for those in the ark. Man and beast obliterated, and Noah and all the ark inhabitants floating endlessly on the deadly waters. And then God remembered Noah. Chapter 8, verse 1. You see, this story is so much more than a historical lesson of something that happened or did not happen thousands of years ago, and so much more of a story that wants to tell us about what is going on in God's heart. In the first place, we see that this is not just a God that gets angry. He also gets a heavy heart. He is saddened by what people are doing. It almost reminds me of a parent that is so angry with one of their children that they want to grab him by the throat. But they don't do that. This anger is not pure anger. It's not anger for anger. It's anger from an intense sadness. It's an anger because they are concerned. God is like such a parent. He is angry and he is sad and he threatens to destroy everything and he threatens to walk away. But in the end, he does not do that. He sees Noah and he starts a new creation. That's what God does. He creates from chaos. In chapter 8, as we've just seen, God thinks about Noah. I'm sure that Noah by then felt that God had forgotten all about them. But it's not true. God thought about Noah. Do you see the heart of God? Not one of Israel's neighbors could say that their God or gods were thinking about them. But Yahweh is different. In spite of all his intentions and anger and sadness, he still thinks about his creation. Do you see the heart of God? And the moment that he thinks about Noah, the water starts to subside. And the family could again eventually set foot on dry land. If you read closely between the lines here in chapter 9, you'll see something is different. You will see the parallels with Genesis 1, the blessing of being fruitful and fill the earth, to govern over everything, the animals, the fish, the birds. But this blessing, with the metaphor of blood, goes a bit further to say that we should also govern in the favor of all people. Unlike the animals, a human's blood may not flow. God is concerned about every human life. Do you see the heart of God? The holiness of everyone's life is apparent. I hear something of Luke 12 here. Do you remember Luke 12? Are not 2 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, yet not one of them is forgotten by God? Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Do you see how God's heart is changing? From the God who is angry and regrets his creation, who is intensely sad about the evil in it, the God who out of anger decides to undo everything, to the God who reconsiders, to the God who remembers, to the God who recreates, to the God who blesses and makes a covenant with his people. It's important to see that God's heart does not change because the humans changed. If you read the story further, you'll see that actually very little has changed. They still lived far from God. They are still disobedient. There is still a lot of evil going on. So what changed? God changed. God made a decision about his anger and his sadness, and therefore he says, never again. Never again his sadness and heavy-heartedness and anger will lead to this kind of destruction. Never again. And this is the symbol of the rainbow. Never again. You may ask a question, but what about? What about the tsunami, the floods, the earthquakes, the wars, in which thousands and even millions of people have died? What about the Holocaust that killed more than 6 million Jews? It almost sounds like a second flood to me. But anyone that thinks that God used any of these, or any other situation in my life or in your life to punish us, did not take notice of this story. The story helps me to understand that from the beginning to the end of the story, there is a change in God's heart. This change brings about change in our relationship with God. God is not the autocratic father who out of anger disciplines his children. He is the father who chooses to love his child. Like many other parents, I regularly remind my children that there is nothing they can do to make me not love them. The story reminds us that there is nothing we can do to make God not love us, because he chose to say, never again. Hence the rainbow, to remind us, never again. To remind God, never again. That never again will we be forgotten. To remind us that we are not being punished, but that we are loved. To remind us that God is with us. So what do we do with all these things that go wrong that we just mentioned? The Holocaust, the world wars, the floods, the fire, the earthquakes, cancer, COVID, your loss, your divorce. The world has not changed. There is still evil all around us. We still live in a broken world where things go horribly wrong. But when things go wrong, and when we experience the storms of life, and we see the rainbow thereafter, we will be reminded that never again will God punish us out of anger. He is the Father who knows us. He is the one who cares, the one who will be with you all the time. I want to close the service with one of my favorite worship songs. It's a rendition of Numbers 6, The Blessing. Please listen with me.
Lord bless you and keep you, make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn His face toward you and give you peace. The Lord bless you and keep you, make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn His face toward you and give you peace. The Lord bless you and keep you, make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn His face toward you and give you peace. We receive, we agree, amen, amen. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family and your children and their children and their children. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family and your children and their children, their children. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, your family and your children and their children, their children. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, your family and your children and their children, their children. May His presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, He is with you.